G'day guys,
Hi.
James and Ant here. So we just want to talk to Jim today about grain structure.
Indeed, yeah.
In particular, narrow versus wide grains.
That's the one. So we've got two versions here. So there's that. That's the the wider grain mat. So you've got what about 7 or 8 grains in that face.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 in that one.
And effectively there you've got a really good structure in the grain. You've got a nice feel in the performance. You've got longevity as well. And so you've got two distinct versions here. You've got a narrow grain here that's got just about 19, 20 odd grains in the face. Mm-hmm. Now that does give a slightly different feel. It's a slightly harder bit of timber, and so it does tend to perform a little bit quicker, but it does depend on how you press it. So in here you've got two different styles of pressing.
So as a rule, what would a tight grain feel like compared to a wider grain?
As a rule of thumb, it's not necessarily a feel thing, it's more performance. Mm-hmm. Performance, you'll tend to find a narrow grain will perform a little bit quicker, but it won't last as long because they tend to break up.
So the performance lifespan, it's right at the start of it, it goes up and then tails off faster.
Right, yeah. And it's not always the case though, because sometimes it might just be that it's a younger piece of willow but from higher up in the tree, and so that then gives the narrow grain, but it's not necessarily as nice a feel, so sometimes they can be quite dense. So it's actually
so that's where there's no actual strict rule.
There is no real strict rule. It's it's certainly traditionally that's the way you'd select, but when you're actually selecting timber, you might find that it's quite different in reality. So as a rule of thumb, you've got to be hitting the face with a mallet or a ball to determine what the bounce feels like, and then a lot of it is in the pressing. It's when we're actually manufacturing the blade to decide what the best is we're going to get out of that piece of timber.
So when you're grading, obviously the higher the willow grade, you do tend to start to get more grains. But sometimes even in special reserve or legend, you get a really tight grain back.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that usually the younger willow from further up on the tree?
Not necessarily. It just might be that in legend or special reserve, there's just more knotty bits or more discoloration and that sort of thing. So that hence the grade will go down. It's more a cosmetic thing than anything. But in there, you do have to make sure that when you're grading out that you've got the right sort of performance in there as well. You can get a perfectly looking piece of timber with narrow grain, but it can be really heavy and feel really clunky, and so it doesn't actually necessarily make the reserve grade or the primary grade. So it's one of those things that it does depend on how it's actually going to feel.
Fantastic. So I think that covers us on narrow grain versus wider grain. Now, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Either private message us on Facebook or just in the comments below. Cheers.
Absolutely.